Come now, let's lend them a hand.
Greedfall is an RPG where you can piss off a lot of people. Factions might loathe your guts as you make decision after decision that goes against their principles, or you might be impartial enough to let their dubious choices go unchallenged and be their best bud. Companions can loyally stand by your side or become furious if you ask an indelicate question. Normally, the prospect of so many characters despising me would be off-putting, but in Greedfall, it's not. Because in Greedfall, there are many, many more things occupying my mind. You play a neutral party called Desarde, who's sent off to the recently discovered island of Tirfredi to find a cure for the plague ravaging your homeland. With magical monsters to fight, factions to bargain with, and a mystery at the heart of Tirfredi itself to solve, there's plenty in Greedfall's world to marvel at. But it's not perfect, so there are a couple of things that could be improved. To help you decide if it's worth getting, we've got a list of the 6 things we liked about Greedfall and 3 we didn't. This game has its ups and downs, so let's get started. Let's start with the good stuff. One of the nifty things about Greedfall is that you have a couple of ways to complete some quests. So, at the beginning of the game, you have to break into a warehouse belonging to the Naught faction to help the Coin Guard faction, who are basically mercenaries, get some extra goodies onto your ship that's bound for Tirfredi. It's up to you whether you kill the guards, therefore losing reputation points with the Naught faction, a seafaring nation, drug them with a sleeping potion, disguise yourself, sneak in, or simply don't do the quest at all, and deal with an annoyed coin faction in Tirfredi. Some options, like crafting a sleeping potion, are only available if you took the Alchemist talent, which lets you craft potions, but the rest is basically up to you. I found that it forced me to think strategically, whether that was timing my sneaking so I wasn't spotted, or trying to find the right disguise to get into the warehouse. Disguises aren't obviously marked as such in your inventory, so you do have to be creative. So, think about it. The Naughts probably wouldn't blink an eye if you wore a sailor's outfit and strolled into their warehouse, but if you're wearing plate armour, you're gonna look suspicious. That disguise feature is by far one of the coolest things about Greedfall, as it also helps you enter faction-controlled areas later in the game incognito. If you've pissed off that faction, they'd usually attack on sight, but in a disguise, you're able to avoid confrontation. Those different ways to complete objectives are by far one of the best things about Greedfall, and it means that if you want to do a second playthrough, you've got tons of different ways to do things, well, differently. Your companions really do matter in Greedfall. Sure, they're useful, as they help you out in combat, and later in the game Siora can even translate the native language for you, so you don't miss any key information, but they're simply great characters too. Outside of quests, if you take the time to talk to your companions, they, unsurprisingly, warm up to you. Ask them about their past and you'll gain relationship points with them, which can get you bonus talent points down the line. The flip side to this is that if you ask an indelicate question, they'll get pissed and your relationship will deteriorate. Giving you an incentive to get to know your companions by giving you those bonus talent points is a great way to make sure you actually do care about them, and that's not just because of their winning personalities. During some quests I did, you can even give them the reins and let them conduct interrogations. Your character, Desarde, is a diplomat, so sometimes you need someone who already knows the person you're talking to, and being able to rely on your companions for help in conversations is just really cool. Their approach might work, or it might not. Regardless, it felt good to be able to let Kurt, for example, handle an interrogation about his missing friend, because just letting us do all the talking would be a bit weird. What that also means is that they do far more than just stand in the background and make remarks. They can actually control what happens next, which I think is a pretty cool detail. It is up to you whether you let them conduct interrogations, so you're never taken by surprise when one of them decides to control the conversation. Greedfall's world is tricky. With 5 factions and your own, supposedly neutral one to deal with too, there's quite a few decisions that will put you in a difficult position. I won't spoil any of the ones I ran into here, as they're often the culmination of a quest, but deciding which laws of your faction, the Congregation of Merchants, apply to different groups is really tricky. What might seem like the logical, impartial choice sometimes seems morally dubious. But obviously, if you start siding with one faction over the other, or even just piss off another faction, the Congregation of Merchants aren't going to be particularly happy with you either. You'll gain reputation with certain factions, or NPCs, by giving them what they want, unsurprisingly, and sometimes that's the right thing to do. Other times you might be torn between 2 factions, and then you'll have to decide which one is strategically better to cozy up to. Your relationship between the factions can vary massively with different playthroughs, so Greedfall is definitely the kind of game you can try a couple of times to see how quests could have ended differently. The small things also matter in Greedfall. Tiny, world-building details end up making the final experience much more immersive, whether that's waiting until nightfall to get some sensitive information from an informant, or hiding behind a rock to surprise a traitor to another faction. Cities might be relatively safe during the day, as long as you don't head into any closed-off alleys, but during the night you'll run into groups of thugs who call you Blue Blood, knowing that you're a cousin to the royal family. The special quests you get to improve your relationship with your companions can't be ticked off in one go either, as you have to progress in the main quest to unlock new stages. Kurt, for example, asks me to give him time to go find out information about his friend on his own. So, having a gap until I get to play the next bit of his quest actually makes quite a lot of sense. Once again, these are small details, but I really like them. Good God, another thing that's great about Greedfall is the travel pause. This might be quite a Marmite thing for some of you, but let me explain. As Greedfall's world is in zones, like Dragon Age Inquisition, while you're waiting for each zone to load, which doesn't take long at all by the way, you're put in a little waiting area where you can change which companions accompany you, sell and buy things from a merchant, craft potions and upgrade armour. Think of it like a brief breather. What the travel pause does is give you a prompt to make sure you're prepared for your next mission, and means that I actually remember to sell the stuff I'm not using and buy better kit along the way. I really, really like it. And, if nothing else, it reminds me that eventually I need to take my Naught companion out on a mission, just at least once, because the look he gives me when I just run past him each time is getting to me a tiny bit. Upgrading your armour and weapons might seem pretty rote nowadays, but Greedfall's upgrade system focuses on the aesthetic as well as the actual improvements to stats, and really benefits from it. Upgrades to the strap across your chest are named depending on what kind of archetype you're playing, like a thief, for example, and the appearance changes depending on which one you pick. Plus, your armour gets more and more ornate the more you upgrade it. I'm not usually the crafting type, but after seeing how different I can make my Desade look, I'm already eyeing up the crafting skill tree. The same thing goes for when you're upgrading your melee weapons, as you can change the handle and the pommel on most of them. Character creation is so important in RPGs nowadays, so having this extra ability to tweak your appearance is nifty. Okay, so now onto the things that need improving. Combat is easy to get to grips with, but fights can get repetitive quite quickly, especially if you use magic, which only has 2 different types of attack and, at the beginning, only 1 type of spell. You can do special fury attacks once you generate enough adrenaline, but as it's quite easy to fill up the yellow meter, fury attacks don't really have the kind of prestige attached to them that they would if they took longer to earn and did a lot more damage. Plus, it's never entirely made clear if you can or can't res your companions when they fall down, or give them health potions, or change which attacks they use, so a little more companion management in combat wouldn't go amiss. Oh, and I'm being driven a bit crazy by the sound of my companions telling me to drink a potion whenever my mana runs low.
No magic here. Drink a potion.
Running out of energy. Drink a potion.
No magic here. Drink a potion.
You're running out of energy. Drink a potion.
No magic here. Drink a potion.
You're running out of energy. Drink a potion.
Seriously.
You're making a grave mistake.
Greedfall has its fair share of bugs too. Not loads, but just enough to make you a tad bewildered when some NPC completely obscures a key conversation by walking in front of the camera. Or when Desade's cape clips through their outfit. Sometimes hitting enemies from a distance doesn't deal any damage and doesn't draw them into combat, meaning that if you're a magic user like me, you effectively waste a spell in doing so as you've got to wait for your mana to recharge to full. Plus, the mouth animations could use some improvement, as they're a tiny bit shonky. Like I said, no major bugs, but definitely enough to be noticeable. This is a big one. Greedfall also needs more varied enemies. I'm already getting tired of fighting the same bear and flying creatures over and over again. Considering the island of Tearfredi is this mystical, mysterious place, it would make sense to have plentiful different types of creatures. But running into the same ones over and over again becomes dull very quickly indeed, and makes me want to just run through fights out of simple boredom instead of actually killing the beasts. Oh, and one very, very, very small last thing. But if I wear a helmet, I want to be able to see my long hair. That is probably super shallow of me, but hey, it's the truth. Okay, I'm done now, I promise. That's 6 things we liked about Greedfall and 3, and a bit, things that we didn't. I'd still say Greedfall is worth getting as the good definitely outweighs the bad, and the game still has a lot of love to give. If you liked the video, stay tuned and subscribe to Eurogamer if you want, as we have a ton of new videos. One goes up every single day, so you've got plenty to watch. Like this video if you enjoyed hearing me chat about Greedfall, and hit the bell icon to get notified when we pop out a new video. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm off to Tearfredi to go make my armour as fancy as possible. Goodbye, friend.